welcome to the Audible presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Stuart Mandel, joined as always by Bruce Feldman and Ralph Russo. This is our Week 10 reaction show. Guys, I feel like this is the time of the season when the focus shifts to the playoff. The rankings come out for the first time this week, and we had 3 top 10 teams go down just in time for that. We're going to get to all that. Don't forget, every episode of the Audible is available on YouTube at Audible Show, including this episode, which is always live, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. Let's start with this. Bruce, your alma mater, Miami, loses at SMU. A team that was ranked number 2 in the country at one point this season is now 6-2, and frankly, probably not going to make the ACC championship game, while Virginia is now alone in first in that conference. Pitt has a shot. Duke has a shot. What the heck is going on? And let's start with Miami, Bruce. What is it like right now for that program? They put so much into Mario Cristobal in this program, and their playoff hopes are on life support again.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly better than they were before he got the program, but honestly, they put so much money into the budget for the roster. They've obviously ramped up. I think the staff has improved. I think he did get, upgraded on defense with Corey Heatherman. But at the end of the day, it's a team. It feels a little bit like the Penn State James Franklin situation, where it seems like they come out pretty tight in situations, and like everything feels like it's harder than it needs to be. Even when they were winning last year, when they had Cam Ward and a more explosive offense, the defense would sputter, and it was just, that's what it felt like yesterday, where early in the game we were watching it in the studio, and it's like, okay, feels like Miami's gonna blow this game open early on. Then they didn't, and then it was just tight all the way around. And then I remember thinking they had about 29 seconds left. They had a timeout. They got the ball. It wasn't like they were inside their own 10. Yeah. And they just basically were like, all right, we're going to overtime. And I remember thinking that
so frustrating.
Yeah, you have a really experienced quarterback with some dynamic receivers. Why you have a timeout? All you need is a field goal to win the game. And I think that decision kind of spoke volumes to me about where the program is right now, Ralph.
Yeah, the ACC in general, as Stu just said, is just crazy. So let me lay out a scenario here, because there are now 6 teams with 1 or 0 losses in the ACC conference-wise. None of them are Miami, and none of them are Clemson, and none of them are Florida State. So those success initiatives that Jim Phillips put in this year to help the Blue Bloods, well, the Blue Bloods aren't getting any of that money unless Miami gets its act together. So the interesting thing to me with Miami, because I don't want to get too bogged, I want to branch this out a little bit, and I think you can here. The interesting thing with me at Miami is I found myself thinking that the best case scenario for the ACC is still Miami wins out and doesn't get to the ACC championship game, and then the ACC champion and Miami both get to the playoff. That still seems like a reasonable scenario to me.
Because the Miami win over Notre Dame is carrying that much weight for them?
I think so. I think so. And plus, maybe USF might be in the playoff too. They might have a wins over 2 playoff teams. So you end up with that, and that carries Notre Dame in. But then I found myself thinking, because I've heard other people talk about it, or does that lock Notre Dame out of the playoff? What do you think, Stu?
Well, first of all, if Notre Dame wins out, they're going to the playoff. I really don't think they have anything to worry about.
You sure?
Yeah, 10 straight wins by that point, they'll be in the playoff.
What is going to be their best wins, Stu?
It's USC, I guess, right? USC helped them out a little bit by beating Nebraska. I just think you're going to have a hard time. I mean, we'll find out, right? We'll see where they are in the pecking order on Tuesday. I believe, Ralph, and the AP poll, aren't they going to be probably the highest 2-loss team? I was looking at that last night.
Notre Dame?
Yeah.
They're not on this guy's ballot. I still have Miami ahead of them. Again, I understand Miami.
Oh, yeah, you got to do that, right?
I don't know if you have to do it. I did it. I don't know if you have to do it, because there's a couple other ones that get weird when you start like honoring the head to head. Like where Texas is on my ballot this week, I'm sure I'm going to hear about it. But again, like what are you going to do here? It is also fascinating. Like I just don't know if, especially with Georgia Tech losing yesterday. Now Georgia Tech has a chance to get that big win against Georgia, but I also find myself thinking like, did what happened in the ACC also bring, we're a little stuck in this world of, well, the Big 12's only getting one and the ACC might get two. Why does it have to be that way?
Well, it might have flipped, right? It might have flipped yesterday. To your question, though, about scenarios, the most surefire way for the ACC to get two at this point, because, clearly this is going to be some crazy tiebreaker. The way this is shaping up, there's going to be some crazy tiebreaker for who gets in the championship game. If Georgia Tech were to win out, which includes beating Georgia, but still misses the ACC championship game, they're in, and the ACC champion is in, right? That's your cleanest path. I think Miami is not done. I think 10-2 Miami would have a shot because, like you said, those good non-conference wins. I just don't believe they're going to win out. I think we have seen Carson Beck kind of devolve into this interception machine. That was just brutal. The pick that doomed them in overtime, and you can just kind of see like I'm sure there's a doubt creeping in of like, oh gosh, this is happening again. The same thing, the penalties, the late game management, the turnovers. It's just, now I'm not saying they have a murderer's row down the stretch. They do play Pitt. If they do get to 10-2, they have a better shot. Last year's team obviously went 10-2 and missed. This year's team has the Notre Dame game going in its favor. And also and this will come up on Tuesday, there's not going to be an abundance of 10-2 teams with great resumes by the time we get to that last ranking on the last Sunday. You're going to be talking about some teams that you're holding your nose at a little bit that might still make the playoff. But you mentioned the Big 12. Going into yesterday, the Big 12 was the one with the chaotic standings. And then a few things happened. Utah beat Cincinnati, crushed Cincinnati, handing Cincinnati its first conference loss. Houston, right when we'd been getting in on their bandwagon, right, loses to West Virginia. I'm missing one important result from yesterday. Obviously, Texas Tech
That's the one.
took care of business, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
BYU
is off. You look at it now, and I feel like the seas have parted. It's BYU 5-0, Texas Tech 5-1, Cincinnati 5-1. I'm kind of putting Cincinnati off now because that was a demolition. BYU visits Texas Tech this week, guys. Battle for first place. It might be the best game in the country this week, honestly. And they could possibly play twice. So do you see a scenario, Bruce, where they could both get in? Muted.
Possibly. I think what would take it is if they're going to need a lot of help because, as you said, the idea that we have a bunch of two-loss teams sounds great on early November, but the reality is, teams start stumbling around and get knocked off a little bit, much like, honestly, Miami did yesterday. I think if you have, let's say they split those games, right? So BYU ends up 12-1 and Texas Tech ends up at 11-2. I think the question is Texas Tech, does Texas Tech win the game that matters most? If it's the Big 12 title game, right? Then all of a sudden, if you're BYU at 12-1, but you didn't win the conference title, but you lost the conference championship game, that would seem like an obvious way to get two teams in, no, Ralph?
Wait a second. Yeah, you could. Yes, you could have that. Yes, that would seem to be the way for the Big 12 to get those two in. Texas Tech has
almost certainly if it happens that way, right?
Yeah, what's also helping both of those teams is Utah's pretty darn good, but
yes.
they lost their two most important games to Texas Tech and BYU, so that's lifting up those teams because neither of those teams are have a particularly interesting non-conference victory to lay their hat on. So yeah, I mean, the other thing but I do wonder this. Last year, a lot was made of like, oh, you made it to your conference championship game. We don't want to penalize you for making it to the conference championship game. And that was sort of how SMU, and I have no problem with SMU getting in, but that was SMU's path to the playoff, right? Lose the conference championship game, but don't get punished. And they end up getting in. I'm not so sure the committee is going to be beholden to that. I felt like that was a mistake by the committee because it backed themselves into a corner and they couldn't wiggle their way out of it. They were a little too set on like what this thing looks like going in. And I think it was one of those deals where like, oh, this is a 12-team playoff world. We have to be more open to moving some stuff around after these conference championship games. So how that plays out, I think also determines what goes on with the Big 12 and can it get itself in. But again, like they really need those two teams, BYU and Texas Tech now to just kind of, and BYU has to play Cincinnati too. And Cincinnati ain't bad. So this thing could, I know we're putting the Bearcats aside, Stu.
And it's at Cincinnati.
This thing could take one more turn. You're right. This thing could take one more turn.
This being college football, the chances that both BYU and Texas Tech win every game besides the ones against each other the rest of the way, that would not be very college football, right? There's going to be something,
especially in the Big 12.
There's going to be something chaotic.
Yeah,
but I think if that did happen, I mean, I could see them getting two in either way. I mean, let's remember SMU stayed in the race, stayed in part because they lost on a 50-something yard field goal, right? Like it wasn't just. It would have been very hard to knock them out at that point. But if you in this scenario, I mean, I think if Texas Tech wins on Saturday in Lubbock. But that's BYU's only loss. And so they both go into the championship game at 11-1, and BYU wins the rematch on a 50-something yard field goal. I don't see them knocking Texas Tech back out. But it kind of depends on what the rest of the field is. I will just say this, having watched a bunch of Texas Tech, K-State. I know you're not a Texas Tech believer, Ralph. I'm a Texas Tech believer. I think that defense is so good, and they come after you. Jacob Rodriguez had 2 forced fumbles in that game. Romello Height had a sack strip. K-State hung around for a while, and then at some point though, it just comes down to they have dudes on that defense that the rest of the Big 12 does not have. So does that mean they're going to beat BYU this week? I don't know, but I think they're good.
Yeah, I don't think they scored enough touchdowns to make me feel incredibly confident in them in big games. But listen, I know you say I'm not a Texas Tech guy. I'm a little down on them, a little down compared to you guys, because I feel like they have some limitations on offense that the other really big teams do. But they're clearly the most talented team in the Big 12. Another Texas team won't go away from the playoff.
I told you this week they won't go away.
I'm not surprised either. But all of a sudden the Longhorns are kind of back in it after their best 3 quarters of the season, Bruce.
Yeah, and I think it's noteworthy when you look back. So since the Oklahoma game, they have 2 top 10 wins. They just beat Vandy. The final score was closer than I felt like the game actually was. I mean, credit to Vandy for battling back. But in the last month, they have 2 top 10 wins. You know how many top 10 wins Texas has had in the previous 4 years combined? 2. And one of those was against number 10 Michigan early last season, which clearly that wasn't much of a top 10 team in the big picture. I mean, that's kind of wild to think about. Sark had them basically on the brink of 2 national title game appearances, and they had an Alabama win and a Michigan win, right? So I do think a lot of folks, not pointing at you, Stu, but a lot of folks gave up on Arch Manning way earlier than they should have.
Kind of pointing at Stu. We're kind of pointing at Stu.
Well, it does say Texas and Arch right under Stu, so maybe Matt is pointing at him too. Look, in fairness to Arch, all the pieces around him were very inexperienced. The O-line, the receivers, we saw Wingo make a play. Livingstone just come on. His roommate is, I feel like that's going to be the kind of thing we're going to hear about for the next year and a half, that bond. They don't run the ball that well. That's a concern. So Ralph, they're sitting there with 2 losses now. it's really interesting because we kind of gamed this out yesterday in our green room about they still have Georgia, they still have Texas A&M, and if they split, they're 9-3. If they split, I don't know if it matters which one you win. I think it would matter, to people in Texas if you knock off A&M and they're the undefeated team and you give them their first loss. But if they're 9-3, we saw 3 SEC teams with 3 losses last year not make the playoff. It is a very different year this year than last year. I mean, do you think at 9-3, what their resume is, they would have a very good chance, not like a chance, but a very good chance to get in the playoff?
Sure. I think that, again, like we start gaming this out and you start doing what if they're 10-2? And now all of a sudden there's like 15 teams, 16, 17 teams in a 12-team playoff that we're all saying, yeah, sure, they could get in. Probably, Oklahoma beats Tennessee yesterday. Vandy's still pretty good. Vandy has Tennessee at the end of the year. And then the weird thing about Texas is how much, and I just, at a certain point, I kind of move on from the almost losses because they almost lost to Kentucky and they almost lost to Mississippi State. And I understand that bothers people when you almost lose, but almost losing is also called winning. Right? There's no such thing as like either you win or you lose. And the fact that they won and we see all these other teams stumbling, losing some games, like I'm not like at a certain point, maybe early in the season, but when we get to like week 10, 12, 13, your almost losses are not really something that's going to bother me too much. You know what? Texas also played the number 1 team in the country to a 7-point game. Right, in Ohio State. So I feel like the weird thing about Texas, Stu, is these very high highs and these very low lows, but they're still super talented. If you put a gun to my head and ask what's going to happen with Texas, they're probably going to lose one of these. They're probably going to lose both of those games, right, to A&M and Georgia, or lose at least one and not get in. But yeah, they are in some ways what we thought they were. They are super talented and they have a high ceiling.
They could also, I could see them, as you guys are talking about this, becoming remember Greg Byrne was on here a few weeks ago making the case, making the retroactive case that Alabama still should have gotten in last year. And what I've always said is they were not a sympathetic 9-3 because they were bad losses. I could see, let's say Texas beats Georgia. No. Let's do it the other way around. Loses close game at Georgia, beats A&M, and A&M's undefeated going into the game. They will become the poster for in SEC land why this 9-3 team should be in over those Big 12 teams we were just talking about, those ACC. And oh, by the way, and maybe we'll get a little window into this Tuesday, the SEC's big push over the offseason was to get the committee to take strength of schedule more seriously. And they adopted, I believe it's strength of record, right? It's a it's their own strength of record metric.
Yeah.
So it's not, just to be clear, it is not exactly ESPN's strength of record necessarily. But since I have ESPN's strength of record in front of me, guess where Texas is ranked in strength of record right now, guys? Ninth.
Okay.
Ninth, ahead of Texas. 2-loss Texas is ahead of Texas Tech, Louisville, Georgia Tech, Virginia. All those teams we were just talking about that have 1 loss are behind 6-7-2 Texas in strength of record, right?
Is that a surprise? That's no surprise.
No,
they opened against a team that's number 1 in the country on the road. They played 2 other teams that are in the top 10. So it's not.
So yes, you just made their argument. That's it. Like you are making their argument.
I think I don't want to make any predictions right now because we don't know what the rest of the field will look like. But if Texas, like you said, Bruce, they have 2 top 10 wins already. I don't know if Oklahoma will still be in the top 10, but
they got a nice win last night though at Knoxville.
They did. And then you add a third. That would be about as strong a case as you could make with a 9-3 team.
Can I pivot quick on something since we're dancing around it? I don't know if it's in the rundown or not, but it's something we talked about a lot on our show last night, which is the rankings are coming out in whatever it is, 48 hours or so. Do you guys agree with me that Indiana should be the number one team based off they have a more impressive win than anything Ohio State has. They went to Oregon and handled the Ducks, and it was impressive, right? I mean, you go through it, sacked Dante Moore 6 times. I think he's only been sacked one other time all season, held Oregon to 1 touchdown. They also have a really nice win on the road against a 6-2 Iowa team. They blew out Illinois. I get it. If you ask me who would I pick on a neutral field, I'm definitely taking Ohio State. But if we're talking resumes, it's not like they've eked by teams. They kick the crap out of the teams they're supposed to beat. So I go to both of you. Do you think Indiana will be number one? And do you think they should be number one on Tuesday night?
I'll go first. I think I don't care if they will be.
That's not the question. The question is, do you care?
I'm going to answer the question. I think they won't be. I think Ohio State will be. And I would have Ohio State there too, because Indiana is really, really good. This is not a slight at Indiana, but I can watch the games and I see what Ohio State has on the field. And Indiana might beat Ohio State. But again, if I'm splitting hairs, it's hard to not look at what Ohio State has and think that's the best team in the country, Stu.
I think it is splitting hairs. And it is hard we all have brand bias, and it's hard not to think Ohio State, if Ohio State and Indiana have very similar profiles, surely Ohio State is the better team. I don't have a great answer to that, Bruce. I think Ohio State will be number one because of that brand bias I just talked about. I mean, they both have Ohio State. We just talked about Ohio State beating Texas, who's now 7-2, right? Like, they have a good win. They won at Washington. To me, they're frankly similar resumes, though I would say Indiana winning at Oregon was more impressive than anything on Ohio State's resume. Is there any chance that we'll spend all our time on this and A&M will be number one? I don't think so. But
the Notre Dame win's nice, but I don't think it's as impressive as the other two. The other two they have.
I just want to say, I don't have brand bias. I have Jeremiah Smith bias. I have Arvell Reese bias, right? I have Carnell Tate bias. Like, they have crazy ass dudes all over the field. And I'm going to lean towards that because I actually think that's a significant way and a smart way to evaluate football teams. Now, I understand. It's got to be a little bit. Like, I mean, we're just being naive if you don't think it's a little bit of an eye test. Now, listen, if Virginia wins out, Virginia should get into the playoff, right? I'm not against those teams that don't pass the eye test by winning their games and getting in. But again, the conversation of who should be number one, Indiana or Ohio State, they both have the same record. They both have similar resumes. I'll take the dudes. Yeah, I'll go dude bias.
Ralph, can I give you a suggestion? I don't know if you major in business at Fordham, but I think
Definitely
the next trip to Columbus, you print out a bunch of shirts on the front that says, I don't have brand bias. And on the back, you say, I have Jeremiah Smith bias, Arvell Reese bias, Caleb Downs bias. You go through it. You'll make a lot of money. You'll make a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I don't think they're invincible. And Indiana is incredibly impressive. They have very good players. I watched that game live against Oregon. But yeah, I don't know, Stu. Like, I do think the eye test has to be a part of this calculation.
Let's talk about the Buckeyes for a second. Obviously, Penn State, that was not the Penn State we thought would be going into the shoe at the beginning of the season. They took care of business. And it was a game where Ryan Day finally said, we have a great quarterback and great receivers, and we're just going to throw to them over and over and over again. And so I'm watching that, and it's been hard for me to I see Julian Sayin stats. They're ridiculous. But it's been hard for me to say, well, is he that great, especially when one Ohio State quarterback after another puts up big numbers? Or is it the fact that he's throwing to, and I agree with what you said, Ralph, two best receivers in college football? I mean, Carnell Tate is playing unbelievable. But I'm watching that, and I'm thinking that game kind of made me a Julian Sayin believer. Not every throw was perfect by any means on those deep balls, but a couple of them, like, that has to be perfect place for Tate or Smith to make that catch. Smith had that ridiculous one-handed catch going into the end zone. I don't know. I could talk myself in circles about this, so I'll just tee up you guys. Bruce, how much of it is Sayin, and how much of it is the fact that he just gets to throw to those dudes?
I think it's both. I think he's really, really good. This was the same guy I saw at the Elite 11 who was the wow guy there because it comes out of his hand really fast. He's really accurate. And I think I'm not saying their team is better than the one that won the national title last year. I think their passing game is better for a couple of reasons. The receivers are as elite as you can get in college, as we've said before. A good tight end, but also I think he is a better passer than Will Howard. He's not the same runner because Will Howard is like almost a tight end breaking loose and runs well, but he is a better passer. And I also think there's a piece of this where the play caller right now is Brian Hartline. He wants to show off the toys he's developed, and those receivers are, you just can't say enough about how special they are, right? And so, but I think Julian's saying, I don't want to devolve this into a Heisman conversation because then all of a sudden it's like one of your biggest competitions is going to be Jeremiah. How do you say he's not the most outstanding player in college football when, it's everything, Ralph said and we've said before, but Ralph, like for this, I would circle back. One of you guys, if not both, were at the Ohio State-Texas game. Remember, the season started out, the tight end was really good. Max Clare drops a pass. I think Jeremiah dropped 2 passes. Didn't matter. Those balls were on the money, and you see it over and over and over again. He's an elite. I think he is an elite passer. I hope, it's still his first year. Let's not rush him off to the NFL or put in these crazy comps. But the guy he reminds me most of that Ohio State has had is C.J. Stroud, because C.J. Stroud was remarkably accurate. Now, C.J. Stroud, when he needed to run, could really run. But Ralph, we haven't seen this team really as they keep evolving. The defense has been really good. Like when you watch Sayin, is he that much better? Because remember, going into the season, it was like, is it Lincoln Keenholz? Is it going to be him? There was a legitimate quarterback battle. And it's crazy to think that there was, unless they're sitting on, some version of Cam Newton from the Dakotas.
So the Dakota Cam Newton is pretty fun. Is pretty cool. So they clearly have executed an interesting plan here with Sayin. Absolutely, they were protecting him and easing him in early, right? They didn't put a lot on him at Texas. They didn't even put a lot on him at Washington. I found myself thinking at Washington, they were a little bit conservative, even though they had the great receivers. And then as he has come along, Ryan Day literally has said it. Like, it's not like I'm deducing anything here. He has literally said, we have been trying not to put too much on him. His first road start at Washington, let's go easy. We have a great defense. We don't need to let him throw 35 times. But he is also clearly now taken the reins off. They are leaning into how good this quarterback is. They are leaning into how good the receivers are. As far as who's more, who's better or where the credit goes more, all I know is I picked Jeremiah Smith in the Heisman draft with my number 1 pick because I figured he would have the advantage of being the guy who helped bring along the quarterback, the new quarterback. But the quarterback is playing so well right now, I think he is eclipsing Jeremiah Smith.
Well, Jeremiah Smith's problem, if you're talking about Heisman, is that his own fellow receiver, Carnell Tate, has actually put up slightly better numbers than him.
Yeah,
so it's not even clear he should be the receiver from his own team. Julian Sayin, Bruce, you made that C.J. Stroud comparison, and I would say it's actually, in terms of his progression, reminds me very much when C.J. Stroud was the redshirt freshman and he was throwing to Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. And it was very easy to say it was the receivers. And I covered the game, and it was like early November. They kicked the living crap out of Mel Tucker's really good Michigan State team. And C.J. Stroud threw for a ton of yards. And it was the first game where you could tell from the questions where people were like, oh, this quarterback, he went very quickly from the redshirt freshman, can he do it or not, to holy crap, this guy's really good. And that might have been what this game was with Julian Sayin. By the way, he's completing 80.7% of his passes. 80.7. 10 yards per attempt, 23 TDs, 3 INTs. I assume he will either be number one or very close to number one in the athletics Heisman straw poll this week. So I still can't answer whether it should be Ohio State or Indiana. Probably Ohio State. Maybe because we've just spent 5 minutes talking about them. All right, we're going to switch over to
Can we stay in the Big Ten? Can we stay in the Big Ten, please? Just a little bit?
Sure.
All right.
Oh, USC Nebraska, of course.
Yeah, because USC Nebraska was kind of an elimination game. And, good for USC winning on the road. That they don't do that, right? They haven't shown a lot of like tough road win ability under Lincoln Riley. I think that's why a lot of us have had a hard time trusting. And I know Dylan Raiola got hurt, but nonetheless, they got a tough road win.
King Miller, what a revelation that guy is. A walk-on.
Exactly. But what I think is more interesting is where this sets up the Big Ten going forward, because it looks like the Big Ten has 3 college football playoff locks, though one of us on this podcast went on national TV.
Apparently there's only 2.
And made a pretty bold prediction that I like. So explain yourself, Bruce, because I think that you spotted it before the rest of us did, and then I stole it from you for my column today.
Okay, well, you can steal all you want, Ralph. You've beautified this show, so for sure. So our producers had asked us, hey, give us each a bold prediction for November. And so I was like, this was my pick early in the year in the preseason was because I had gone so chalk last year. I even picked Oregon to win the national title coming into the bracket. But I was like looking at it going, the schedule to me is like, doesn't set up great in the back half. And there's something I don't feel great about. And then obviously they got off to a fast start before losing to Indiana. But I'm like, when you look at what they have in the month of November, they got to go to Iowa. That is a tough place to play, especially in November. It's also a tough place to play for still, kind of an inexperienced quarterback. And then you also have USC in there. Now, USC has to go to Oregon, but now at least USC has a road win under their belt. We'll see if they can build off that. And then the final game of the season, and this is the wild one to me, is Washington is 6-2. Husky Stadium is a really tough place to play. I think Damon Williams Jr. is, I don't want to say he should bump, Julian Sayin from the Heisman race of the Big Ten, but he is a big time talent. They have a terrific running back in Jonah Coleman. The defense is kind of shaky, but they can be dangerous. So my bold prediction was that Oregon, if it's a 3-loss Oregon team, I don't think they would make the playoff. And
your bold prediction is that they're going to go 9-3, right?
Yeah.
My bold prediction is they're going to miss the playoff.
Which, by the way, I picked before the season, but here we are.
Ralph?
So yeah, their combined opponents' records is 24-9 the rest of the way. Woo. You even missed Minnesota, and listen, Minnesota, who knows what you're going to get out of those guys? I mean, they needed a miracle to beat Michigan State yesterday, but bully for the Gophers. But nonetheless, they have 4 really hard games. And again, you have, Stu, this interesting round robin of like, Oregon plays Iowa. Iowa plays USC. USC plays Oregon. Now, they could just very well all eliminate each other, and then you get, well, if they eliminated each other, then you'd only end up with 2. But it would seem like at least one of those teams.
Unless Washington runs a table. Washington has 3 very winnable games and then hosts Oregon.
Yeah, and Michigan is still in here too with only 1 conference loss, oh, by the way, and not much to play until they play. But they have Maryland, Northwestern, and Ohio State left. I think Northwestern. You have to fact check me on that one. That's not much. Like, they're probably going to go into the Ohio State game with a chance to be in the Big Ten championship game. So we have focused very much on the top of the Big Ten. The Big Ten has been sort of the sleepy conference for a lot of this year after Penn State crashed and burned early. But now, Stu, we actually have a really compelling month of November for the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, it's been easy to mock like the, oh my gosh, the CBS game this week is UCLA, Indiana, or whatever it may be. But yeah, the back part of the schedule is pretty intense. I do think, I'll say it now, I won't save it for later in the week. Oregon goes down at Kinnick, little Kinnick magic. I think the Hawkeyes, people are sleeping on the Hawkeyes. By the way, the only team to take Indiana to the wire was Iowa so far this season. 20-15 loss for Iowa there. Yeah, I mean, their offense is decent now. Not great, decent. Defense, still really good. So they're in good position. I think the Big Ten is going to get 3 teams, but I don't know that they're going to get more than 3 teams. And so I guess what we're saying is, if they are getting 3, don't assume the third is Oregon. And I would agree with you guys. That is by far the toughest road any of those teams have left.
Can I pivot us before we get to the disaster that has been Hugh Freeze at Auburn? Speaking of Nebraska, there was big news out of there. I think it was Thursday night or whatever. There were reports from local reporters that there's an extension there. Matt Rhule is not going to Penn State. Matt Rhule is going to stay at Nebraska. They made a huge financial commitment to him. After that, they ended up losing another game against a ranked opponent. It's like, I think he's lost his last 19 games against top 25 opponents. Stu, you are not, you didn't hold your tongue on your feelings on Nebraska, how they did the deal or that they did the deal. What was what got you the most about it?
I just, Nebraska fans got pretty ticked off at me. And it wasn't even really a statement about Nebraska as much as this whole ridiculous coaching cycle, right? Matt Rhule possibly will go to Penn State, right? It's all a rumor at this point. He's 18-15 at the time of this extension, 18-16 now. And they have committed $71 million guaranteed. No matter what Matt Rhule does from here, he's going to make at least $71 million. Nebraska did a very good PR job, and their fan base bought it hook, line, and sinker, of framing it as, no, this is actually a very smart extension we did. We're not raising his salary. The last 2 years, the 2 years we're tacking on will be the same salary, which, by the way, it's an escalating contract. He's going to make $12 million here soon. And this part was important, right? They upped the buyout for him to leave. That was the threat. Penn State might hire him. It's going to cost, if they want to do that, it's going to cost $15 million. They're probably not going to do that, right? So those are the 2 positives. Leaving out the fact that this is yet another contract. They did it 90% guaranteed contract, 90% guaranteed, and now have tacked on 2 years to it. So he had a $49 million buyout. Now it's $71 million. And clearly they're not going to fire him. They're pretty happy with that Rhule. But Penn State didn't think they were going to be firing James. Nobody thinks they're going to be firing their coach one day when they give out these contracts. Everybody assumes he's going to lead them to glory. And then eventually, sometimes that doesn't happen. So I guess what I would say is if Penn State if they hadn't done the extension, guys, and Penn State had hired Matt Rhule, I think Nebraska would have lived. It might not seem like that at the moment, but like you said, Bruce, 19 straight losses to ranked team. He has not, he gets a lot of credit, and understandably so, for rebuilding these programs that he's been at. But you would think somewhere along the way you would have beaten one top 25 team at Baylor or Nebraska.
Well, he did beat some a while ago at Temple, but it was a long time ago. He did have a couple top 25.
He could beat them at Temple. He just hasn't been able to do it in an actual Power 4 program. By the way, I don't hold this one against him. Dylan Raiola, once he got hurt, and I hope he's okay, you could tell their offense was just paralyzed.
Okay, so let's get into the coaching hire that I thought would have gone much better than it has. It's just been dreadful. If you're an Auburn fan, you're looking and you go, man, Lane Kiffin took us down. We ended up with Hugh Freeze, and he can't win there. You're just you lose 10-3 to Kentucky. It's Kentucky's first SEC win of the season. That dropped Freeze to 6-16. It's not like there aren't players there. Keldrick Falk might be a top 10 pick on the defensive line. There's other players who are high-level SEC players on the defense. You have Cam Coleman. He's not Jeremiah Smith, but he's in the ballpark. I mean, he's an elite 5-star receiver. Man, I'll be honest. I thought, I remember my thing was Freeze knows how to win in the SEC. It doesn't seem like it,
Nope.
for one reason or another. And
Turns out not.
Turns out not. Here we are. It's a Sunday, And I feel like, last week at this time, Stu, we were talking about, okay, what's going to happen, with Brian Kelly. We don't think he's going to, it's like the
You want me
James
to go
Franklin
ahead and call
situation.
it? Can I call it? I rule, I ruled James Franklin done after the Northwestern game. I ruled Brian Kelly done.
This is not a hard one for me to
Hugh
be
Freeze
done,
is
Stu.
done. And I'll go ahead and just predict it happens right after we get off the show.
Yeah, just to give people a little, understand, like, we're not going to come back here, and for those who listen to the podcast or are not joining us live, please join us live on YouTube on Sundays. But if you're not, when you're listening to this covers the Hugh Freeze segment, right? Like, even if whether he gets
there will not
whether
be
he gets
a
fired.
big. Wait, you mean you and Bruce aren't going to go spend the week doing a what went wrong for Hugh Freeze story?
Oh God, I don't give anybody any ideas.
No. I don't think
we're
so.
exhausted.
It'd be very simple. He played too much golf. He picked bad quarterbacks in the portal. Enough said. I mean, Bruce, You're right. He had proven he could win the SEC in a different era, right? But the thing that's most puzzling to me is he resurrected himself at Liberty. He had Malik Willis. Like, the guy, by all indications, was still knew what he was doing on offense. And they are just abysmal. 3 years running. They're averaging 15 points a game in the SEC. When you only score 3 points at home against Kentucky, I mean, that's as bad as it gets.
This is what I'm saying also a little bit about, not to draw a direct comparison, about, like, don't talk to me about the almost losses. Well, also don't talk to me about the almost wins, because that's what Hugh Freeze was talking about last night. Oh, patience, we're so close. Hey, man, like, you got to win these games. Like, yes, this is the world we live in now. You're going to play a lot more close games. You got to figure out a way to win a few of them. It's a little more like the NFL. Like, we're close does not cut it anymore, because we're close against Kentucky, and we're also close against Oklahoma, and we're also you're close against everybody, but you're losing all these games.
And
They
no
also could've lost
heinous
the Baylor
officiating
game, by the way.
situation. Yeah. By the way, it's a good comment here from L Classic. Bruce, you're a big wrestling guy. L Classic 15. To use a wrestling analogy, Mark Stoops beat Hugh Freeze in a loser leaves town match last night.
It's going to be a lot harder to get Mark Stoops out of town. It's about triple the money, I think, or maybe
Mark Stoops,
maybe a double and a half. Something like that.
Mark Stoops, win or lose, the last year and a half, he's still one of the best coaches they've ever had there in terms of he got them a couple of 10-win seasons. The offense has been an issue, but again,
He's not out of the woods yet, though.
No, I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying, as it relates to Auburn, you're sitting here looking at this and going, man, we can't get this right? I think Brian Harsin, we all looked at and go, man, that is a bad fit there. This one seemed like a decent fit. Now, Ralph, you and I did we did our What We're Hearing column that went up first thing Friday morning. One of the interesting details in there that I know I heard some people ask me about was, here is the aforementioned James Franklin. Virginia Tech really likes him. He may be trying to slow play his decision there, because if Auburn was going to open up and he had a shot at it, if Florida State, which by the way got a nice win over the weekend against Wake Forest,
which is why we're not talking about Mike Norvell today.
But we are talking about Hugh Freeze, and I don't know if Auburn, I don't know if that's hey, we're going to go grab James Franklin now. I don't know if I don't even know if you look at it and go, oh, that's a better job than Virginia Tech in terms of that.
Wait. Can you picture James Franklin doing War Eagle? Like that, you talk about bad fits. I cannot for the life of me picture James Franklin as the Auburn football coach.
I don't know. I mean, he's been in the SEC, though it was at Vanderbilt.
He's
had success. He's beaten Auburn a couple of times in the last few years. I don't know, man.
I don't know. It's just for some reason.
We're running out of coaches, though, to fill all these jobs.
If you told me Florida, you told me
Could
James
you have
Franklin's
pictured Brian Kelly at LSU, Stu?
No,
that's even more like.
Well, and that's what And it's just, I don't know. It's weird.
How many schools can Lane Kiffin coach, Stu?
Well, I mean, if you told me he's going to be the coach at Florida, James Franklin, for some reason I can picture that more than I can picture him at Auburn. By the way, since I've become somewhat obsessed with these buyouts, it's worth noting that Auburn, if they do this, and I think they will have paid just in this decade, in the first 5 years of this decade, $21.4 million to Gus Malzahn, $15.3 million to Brian Harsin, and now $15.4 million for Hugh Freeze.
On
I
that
think we should, yeah.
on that notes too, can we pivot to shout outs? I want to know you're going
Heck
to give some
yeah.
love to a coach that I am a huge fan
There's a
of.
lot of cause for shout outs this week.
All right, we'll kick
Stu?
it off then, Stu. You're the man.
All right. And I was actually surprised I got this one. I thought for sure Bruce would get it. New Mexico and Jason Eck. They take down UNLV and they are bowl eligible. And this kind of blew my mind. I didn't picture this, but New Mexico hasn't been to a bowl since 2016. Like a Nebraska-like drought there. Quick, name the last coach to take New Mexico to a bowl.
Bob Davie.
Bob Davie.
Good job.
There's a story
Unbelievable,
Stu and
right?
I have on the back end of this that I will share with Ralph. So
All right, 6-3 New Mexico is going to a bowl game for the first time since 2016. By the way, the Mountain West is, what happened there? Boise State got their butts kicked by Fresno. San Diego State's alone in first. Whole other story. All right, Ralph.
I got another school that has never been to a bowl game, and that's going bowling. And that's Kennesaw State. They won for the sixth time. We forget these Conference USA teams because they've been playing on Tuesdays and Wednesdays for the last month or so. I want to shout out Jerry Mack, their coach, though. He's a first-year coach, assistant in the NFL, assistant in big-time college programs. The former North Carolina, oh God, I'm going to screw this up because it's North Carolina Central or North Carolina A&M. He
A&T.
was
A&T.
he was A&T. No, he was the North Carolina. Oh, shoot. I
live
really
here,
want to get this
Ralph.
right. North Carolina Central. I'm sorry. Yes, I know we're live. He was the North Carolina Central head coach. He was the head coach at an HBCU, and a successful head coach, and it wasn't good enough to get him a head coaching job. Other places, we see that a lot. And he had to go to Rice, and then he went to Tennessee, and then he went to Jacksonville. He is doing a bang-up job at Kennesaw State. They're 6-2. They're leading the Conference USA at 4-0. So shout out to the Owls.
nicely done, Ralph. I'm
Well,
going
yeah,
to.
not that nice for a little bit.
Yeah, well, you got the ball.
I got
That's
there.
finished
I
line.
landed
That's
the
all,
plane.
that's all that matters. My shout out is to Duke Scott. He is a running back for NC State. He ran all over the previously undefeated Georgia Tech. Yellow Jackets ran for almost 200 yards and averaged over 9 yards a carry. Duke Scott was a guy that I first heard about over the summer. So NC State has a really, really good strength coach, Coach Thunder, D'Antonio Burnett, who had told me this is a guy who is going to be pretty special. Just you watch. He's a legit 4.35 guy. He's super strong. And he had over 80 yards after contact last night and forced a lot of missed tackles. Obviously, Hollywood Smothers had a terrific year. Duke Scott is a guy that I would expect will have a really, really big 2026. But in his first start, he showed up big, and that was a huge win for Dave Doran and the Wolfpack.
Speaking of Hollywood Smothers, guys, when you do those, I learned a hard lesson this week. When we go to do those breakout players to watch, always check the injury report first. Apparently Hollywood Smothers got hurt at practice and nobody knew, and all of a sudden on Thursday he was maybe it was after we recorded. Anyway, he was questionable and he did not play. So Bruce's guy stepped up in his place, and I gave you the wrong running back to watch. Quick programming note: our Tuesday episode, which usually goes up first thing Tuesday morning, we are going to hold it this week till Tuesday night so that we can react to the first playoff rankings of the season. Don't know that we will do that every week, but certainly for the first one, I'm sure we'll have something to come on here and be angry about. As always, you can see every episode of The Audible on YouTube at Audible Show. I would encourage everybody to check out the one we did with the SEC Shorts guys the other week. It has already become by far our most popular episode so far on YouTube, and I cannot wait to see what they're going to do this Monday morning. We'll see you next time.